Hi everyone, it's Peschu and welcome to my channel. In today's lesson, I want to talk about how to approach market analysis and some of the tools that you can use. When I was a teacher, there were many times when I would see students who would know how concepts worked, they would know the definitions, they did their work diligently, and yet when you would ask them to evaluate the situation, they would not know how to approach this, which was unfortunate because they effectively had all the tools at their disposal. It just sometimes they would not know what to do. And what I saw is that when you do a simple example with them and show them how this can be done, then they were fully capable to do an analysis on their own. So a market can be analyzed in many different ways. However, given that these few videos are aiming at, have been looking at market efficiency, today we'll do that. We'll analyze changes to a market by examining how the market efficiency is changing. So, the analysis will always depend on the situation. If you think about how knowledge is being acquired, initially we know things by defining them and being able to retell them, but the usefulness of all of it would be to actually use them, in practice. So those concepts of consumer surplus, producer surplus, market welfare, welfare loss, we can all apply them to different scenarios in order to decide if situation A is better or worse than situation B, or if we're indifferent between the two situations. So let's have a look. Imagine that we have a market. And now, depending on your assignment, you may be given data that has actual numbers, or you may not have it. If you're an IB student, for example, and you're doing an internal assessment, writing a commentary, it's very probable that the article that you're reading may have the actual price or quantities, and based on those you may try to estimate the consumer and producer surplus. If you're doing an extended essay, again, chances are that you will have the exact data, or a paper tree. Paper tree in higher level economics usually provides that data. However, you don't really need the data. The data will be useful to actually calculate the exact amount of producer-consumer surplus and see how they're being changed. But with simple, tools, graphical tools like shifting demand, supply, examining where the new social welfare will be, you should be able to tell, who is better off, who is worse off. So, in this situation, let's say, imagine that the demand has been increasing. Demand is increasing because of rising population, or the average household income is rising. For whatever reasons, we have a rising demand. And this was, let's go to 0, PE 0. And if the question is saying, analyze the impact on market X after an increase in income, so let's say analyze the impact on market for X after an increase in the average household income, and X is a normal good. So let's say Mr. Z here, analyze the impact on market for X after an increase in the average household income, and X is a normal good. That can be a simple question. So what I've seen many students do is they would kind of figure out that if X is a normal good and income is rising, demand would increase, and thus, we can illustrate this by a shift of the demand curve from D0 to D1, and then they say, well, because of this, the price will increase from PE0 to PE1, and the quantity, the equilibrium quantity would rise from QE0 to QE1, and then they would stop. And this is a good description. It's a description of what's happening to the market, but it's not an analysis. And one way to do an analysis is to compare, let's say, the market efficiency before and after, and see if the consumer and producers are worse off or better off. And this is not the only way to analyze a market, but you can always use a market efficiency analysis to see, what's happening after something is changed in the market. So if we would want to do that, we can look at the old producers. Let's start with the producer surplus. We can look at the old producer surplus, which is this triangle here, and then we can look at the new producer surplus, which will be let me just use this, the green one, like this. So clearly, because of this situation of the rising demand, the producers are better off. Okay, so let's say over here I'm going to have analysis, and I'm going to just put it as bullet points. Producers are better off. Why? Because they're selling more, they're selling at a higher price, and their consumer and their producer surplus is increasing. So because it's always important to actually state why you believe that something is better or worse off. So we have a proof because the price is increased, the quantity that they're selling is increased, and the producer surplus is rising. So the producers are better off. Let's see what's happening to the consumers. Now, in the old equilibrium, the consumers had this surplus. Now, in the new one, I'm gonna use black. In the new one, this whole bit will be, the consumer surplus. However, are consumers better off? Well, it looks like they are. We actually, even though the diagram shows us that the black triangle is bigger than the blue triangle, we cannot be certain because of the way we drew the diagram. Sometimes that may not be the case. Generally speaking, I think the consumer surplus would be increasing. We can probably analyze this mathematically, but that's not what we have to do at the moment. Of course, it would be nice to actually, if you would have the data to compare the two values, but you can do other things. So for the consumers, now, first of all, consumers, remember, they had an increase in income, which is, fairly nice. So they have a rising income, thus they can afford better lifestyle, save money for the future, eat better food, general increase in the quality of life. Go to school, maybe they're, working at a better place, whatever. The economy is picking up. but the income is increasing. The prices are increasing. So, this, from the perspective of the consumer, is not necessarily a good thing. But so at the same time, from the consumption, the quantity that they're consuming is rising. So, this is a good thing. This will be generally, not well perceived by consumers, but this is a good thing. The consumer surplus, 1 second, excuse me. From the perspective of the consumers, an increasing the consumer surplus is rising. So consumer appears to be rising. We can put it this way. So consumer surplus seems to be rising. That's a good thing. And it overall seems that consumers are better off. Consumers are better off. Okay, so far we have discovered that the consumers are better off and the producers are better off, which is, kind of like a win-win scenario. They're both happy, these guys and those guys. Now, what also will be worth examining, if at this point we are in equilibrium. We know that we are in equilibrium, but again, stating that will reinforce the idea that society as a whole is better off. We were optimizing the welfare under the old conditions with D0 and S. Under the new conditions with D1 and S, we are again optimizing whatever we have. So we are at equilibrium. There's no welfare loss. We can state that, and it's always good, even if it's obvious, it's good to state it. So we don't have no welfare loss in any of the two situations. So overall, with the new equilibrium, society is better off. Everybody is happier. And that will be a valid analysis. And that's something that often I haven't seen in, at least early stages of work when students do it. Once they see, the kind of things that they can do, they generally are, they take advantage of those. But that original, transition from being able to describe a diagram and what happens to a market to actually doing an analysis to say, well, yeah, after this increase in income, because of the increase in demand, the producers are better off because they're selling higher quantity at a higher price, their surplus increased, and the consumers are better off because despite the increase in the price, the increase in income and quantity and in overall consumer surplus makes them better off, and because of that, society is better off. That would be a valid analysis. Now, you can come across situations when someone is worse off, and again, doing the same kind of analysis would be able to tell you who is better off and who is worse off. Let's say that a minimum price on a product is imposed. Now, I haven't done a lesson on minimum prices yet, but you will see how it works. And hopefully in the future I'll add one of these. So imagine that originally we were in an equilibrium, like this. PQE. And someone complained that the market was too high and the government placed a maximum price. A maximum price, or sometimes called a price ceiling, ceiling is the top, you cannot go above the ceiling, P max, effectively obliges the firms to sell at this price. They cannot sell above this price. They would want to sell at the price PE, but they're not allowed to. So let's see what happens. The old consumer surplus was this triangle here, and the new one will become this one. I'm gonna do it with clean. So comparing the two consumer surpluses before and after, you know, in this diagram, we don't even know if consumers are better off. You know, we're not even looking at the producers at the moment. We're just looking at the consumers. And why is this happening? Well, this is happening because the quantity consumed has decreased substantially, at least on this diagram. We have a decline in the quantity that is being consumed. And despite this drop in the price, very few people are actually able to buy this product. You know, the maximum price was set very low. And you know, usually it will be the role of the government to actually determine an accurate maximum price that will at least benefit one of the two parties. But you know, in this case, you know, the way we drew it, it does seem that you know, effectively what we need to figure out is if this rectangle over here, if the area of this rectangle is greater than the area of this triangle, because this is what the consumers are losing, and this is what they're gaining. You know, X would be the loss, this plus would be the gain for the consumers. Now let's look at the producers. The producers before had this area, the blue area, but because of the decrease in the price, they're actually now left with this black area at the bottom. So definitely the producers are worse off. So hold on a second. We have created a situation where it seems both parties are actually, you know, worse off than they used to be. And if you would read usually the reasons that governments give for maximum price is to benefit the consumers. You know, always with a maximum price, the producer will be worse off and he or she will be complaining. But usually the consumer should be better off. But because of this vast decline in the quantity consumed, you know, at least in this situation, the consumer is worse off. And overall, we have a welfare loss. Let's call this area Y. So X plus Y would be equal to my welfare loss. So we can see that in this situation, you know, the way we drew it, implementing a maximum price was probably a terrible idea. And we really need to have very good reasons to go ahead with such policy. You know, maybe this unit is only needed by a very small fraction of the population, and we want to make it accessible for them, and the fact that the rest of the population will not be able to buy it, you know, the consumers from Q1 to QE, these consumers will not be able to buy this product, you know, maybe they don't need it as much. It may be some kind of like a life-saving medicine that only this many units are actually needed, and we want to make sure that those units get to the people who need this medicine. So we would need to have some kind of redistributive policy to ensure that the right person gets this good. Of course, those are difficult to implement, and generally maximum price are being looked at as a kind of like, no, don't do this kind of stuff, but we still see them. Anyways, but we are doing an actual analysis here. We are examining how the consumers are affected. We're examining how the producers are affected. We're comparing the old consumer surplus with the new consumer surplus, the old producer surplus with the new producer surplus, the old welfare loss, if any, with the new welfare loss, if any. And based on these comparisons, we're actually going ahead and saying, you know, in this case, this seems like a horrible decision. You know, so don't do it. The question may be asked vice versa. It may be, you know, you may be given a situation where a maximum price was originally implemented, but the market changed somehow, and the government is considering the idea whether this maximum price is still useful. So, you know, then you would go the other way around. Your starting position would be, you know, this. let's go this point A with the maximum price, and your ending position would be E, the equilibrium with no maximum price, and you would have to compare how the consumer surplus will change, how the producer surplus will change. I mean, going from A to E, the producer surplus will clearly increase. It does seem that the producer surplus will increase. The market efficiency, waste will be eliminated. The market will be efficient. Overall, removing the maximum price again will be a good decision. So depending on the situation that you're facing, you can always look at the consumer and producer surplus before and after, and based on those and how overall society is performing, you can say, do this or do that, or don't do anything. We had it best at the beginning. Sometimes one of the groups will be benefiting, the other one will be losing. So, let's say you have a situation like, this would be something where when you have a firm with market power. So we'll see this when we study monopoly, but we can illustrate this. Imagine that this is the market, like that. Let's say like this, and supply, demand, quantity. Never forget to put your units, otherwise you may lose points on your assessments. So this is the equilibrium price, this is the equilibrium quantity, and let's say this firm decides to, it's one firm controlling the market, yada yada yada, it maximizes prices. We'll see this maximizes profit, actually, not prices. But what Sun is happening is that the new price is P1 and the quantity has been decreased to Q1. So we have a declining quantity, increase in the price level. I really don't like my supply. Hold on, guys. Sorry about this, but I did not draw it very nicely. To illustrate my point, I'm going to modify the supply like this. Let's say this is my supply. Okay. Now it's very obvious. When the price was increased, the old producer surplus was this much. And the new producer surplus is becoming this much. So we can see that the gain is definitely bigger than the loss. You see, before, actually, 1 second. This area here, this is loss to producer surplus. But this area here is the gain to producer surplus. And the gain is definitely bigger than the loss. This is usually why firms make that kind of stuff. They increase the prices in order to benefit. They're exploiting the market. Now, so in this situation, the firm is better off, but the consumers, on the other hand, are worse off. What the consumers have lost in total is this green area. So all of this green stuff, or kind of greenish, is the loss to consumer surplus. So the consumers are worse off, the producers are better off. Now the question is society better off? Well, we can do this by looking at equilibrium. We know that social welfare is maximized. Because we're not in equilibrium, we have a high price, we actually have a, I'm gonna put some coordinates, X, Y, and Z. Also, guys, when you're doing this, if you don't have colors, just use points. to illustrate, which areas you're talking about. It's nice and easy. You can say that X, Y, Z is the welfare loss. Oops, welfare loss. So XYZ is the welfare loss, and thus society is worse off than it used to be. At the equilibrium point, this point Y, society was definitely better off than the at point X. So this would be a clear indication when the firms are benefiting, the consumers are worse off, and society as a whole is worse off. So if you want to do a recommendation, you can say, well, the firm should not be allowed to increase the price to P1. And actually, this is a good situation when a maximum price can, the government may decide, let's set a maximum price at PE in order to force the firm to produce as much as they wanted. And in this case, they will have to increase their output to QE, So if they can figure out what the correct equilibrium price should be, they can try to set a maximum price. And this could be a valid political decision, to affect the market. Anyways, I cannot go through every single example to show you how the efficiency will be changing and how the consumer and producer surplus will be changing. But I hope that you get the idea that you need to look at the old situation, compare that to the new situation, compare the old consumer surplus with the new consumer surplus, the old producer surplus with the new producer surplus, the old welfare loss with the new welfare loss, if any, and based on those, make a statement that says, the market is better off, the market is worse off, society is better off, society is worse off, because so and so. And if you do that, that will be considered a valid analysis given the available information, and you'll suddenly find out that you are getting A's on those papers. Alright, I hope you liked this video. If you did, please hit the like button. If you have questions, paste them in the comments. I'll try to answer them. If you didn't like something, let me know so I can change things. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so, and I hope to see you again. Take care.